The stars had never seemed so cold.
Admiral Chen Wei-lin stood before the panoramic viewport of the USF Defiance, her weathered hands clasped behind her back as she watched the massive Vorthanian fleet emerge from hyperspace. One ship after another blinked into existence, their obsidian hulls drinking in the light of Sol, their weapon arrays pulsing with barely contained energy.
She counted them. 50, 100, 200. They kept coming.
Admiral, her XO, Commander Marcus Webb, spoke from behind her, his voice carefully controlled despite the tremor she could detect beneath it. Final count is 347 capital ships, plus support vessels. We're looking at approximately 800 vessels total.
Chen didn't turn around. She simply nodded, her reflection in the viewport betraying nothing of the cold dread settling into her bones. Earth's combined fleet numbered 42 ships.
"The Vorthanian flagship is hailing us," the communications officer reported. "They're demanding to speak with whoever leads humanity."
Chen finally turned, surveying her bridge crew. Young faces, most of them. The best and brightest humanity had produced in its desperate rush to the stars. They'd been spacefaring for barely 70 years, a cosmic infant compared to the ancient empires that dominated the galaxy.
"Put them through," she said. "Let's hear what they have to say." The main view screen flickered, and the face of a Vorthanian appeared. Admiral Chen had seen their kind before. Tall, pale beings with elongated skulls and eyes like pools of liquid mercury. They called themselves the Vorthanian hegemony, and they had ruled their corner of the galaxy for over 50,000 years. "I am Supreme Commander Keth Voren," the alien spoke, its voice carrying the cold precision of a species that had long ago forgotten what it meant to feel. "I address the leaders of the human species." "I'm Admiral Chen Wei-lin, commanding officer of Earth's defense fleet," Chen replied. "I'm listening."
Keth Voren's silver eyes seemed to study her with clinical detachment. "Your species has been observed for the past 3 of your decades. You have spread beyond your birth world. You have established colonies. You have built warships." The alien paused. "You have violated the hegemony's expansion protocols."
"We weren't aware of any protocols," Chen said, keeping her voice level. "No one informed us." "Ignorance is not a defense," Keth Voren replied. "The hegemony does not announce itself to every primitive species that stumbles into the void. We observe. We evaluate. We decide." "And what have you decided?" The alien's lipless mouth curled into something that might have been a smile on a human face. On Keth Voren, it looked like a wound. "Your species presents a statistical anomaly. Your rate of technological advancement exceeds predicted models by a factor of 7. Your population growth, despite limited resources, has maintained geometric progression. Your aggression index, based on historical analysis, is among the highest we have ever recorded." "We prefer to call it determination," Chen said. "What you call it is irrelevant." Keth Voren's voice hardened. "What matters is what you are, and what you are is a threat. Not now, perhaps, not in a century, but in a millennium, 2? Your species would consume worlds, challenge established powers, upset the balance that has maintained galactic civilization for epochs." Chen felt the cold dread crystallize into something sharper. She understood now. This wasn't a diplomatic mission. This wasn't a first contact scenario that had simply gone wrong. This was an execution. "The hegemony has made its decision," Keth Voren continued. "Your species will be contained, Your colonies will be sterilized. Your fleet will be destroyed. Your birth world will be occupied, and your population reduced to sustainable levels. You will serve the hegemony as a subordinate species, your breeding controlled, your technology restricted, your future predetermined.
The bridge had gone deathly silent. Chen could hear her own heartbeat, slow and steady despite everything.
"And if we refuse?" she asked. Kethvoran's silver eyes seemed to glow. "Then your species will not be contained. It will be exterminated. Every world, every colony, every ship, every man, woman, and child. You will become another extinct species in the hegemony's archives, a footnote in our history, a cautionary tale for other primitives who might consider defiance." Chen nodded slowly, as if considering the offer. Behind her, she could feel the tension radiating from her crew, could practically hear their hearts pounding in their chests. "How long do we have to decide?" she asked. "You have 12 of your hours," Kethvoran said. "Use them to consult your leaders. But do not waste them in futile preparation. Your fleet cannot stop us. Your weapons cannot harm us. Your only choice is between submission and extinction." The screen went dark. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then, Commander Webb stepped forward, his face pale but determined. "Admiral, what do we do?" Chen turned back to the viewport, watching the Vorthanian fleet spread across the stars like a dark tide. "Open a channel to Earth," she said quietly. "They need to hear this, all of them." The message reached Earth within the hour. In the United Earth Parliament, emergency sessions were called. In military command centers across 3 continents, generals and admirals gathered around holographic displays showing the overwhelming enemy force. In homes and apartments, in cities and villages, in every corner of humanity's birth world, people watched their screens with a mixture of terror and disbelief. President Sarah Okonkwo addressed the world from the General Assembly chamber, her face composed, but her eyes carrying the weight of a species' future. "My fellow humans," she began, 12 hours ago, we received an ultimatum from an alien civilization calling themselves the Vorthanian hegemony. They have demanded our unconditional surrender. They have demanded that we accept occupation, population reduction, and eternal servitude. They have threatened us with extinction if we refuse." She paused, letting the words sink in. "I will not stand here and tell you that we can defeat them. Our military analysts estimate that the Vorthanian fleet possesses weapons and defenses centuries beyond our own. Our fleet, brave as it is outnumbered nearly 20 to 1. By every conventional metric, we cannot win this war." In homes across the world, parents held their children close. Soldiers gripped their weapons. Scientists stared at their equations, searching for impossible solutions. "But I will tell you this," Okonkwo continued, her voice rising, "since the first human looked up at the stars and wondered what was there, since the first human painted on a cave wall or buried their dead with flowers, since the first human defied the darkness and built a fire against the might, we have never, ever surrendered our future to another." She stepped forward, away from the podium, closer to the cameras. "The Vorthanian hegemony has ruled their corner of the galaxy for 50,000 years. They have enslaved hundreds of species. They have exterminated dozens more. They look at us and see primitives, insects, vermin to be crushed or caged. They believe they know what we are. Her eyes hardened. They are wrong. We are the species that climbed down from the trees and looked at the savannah and decided it was ours. We are the species that crossed oceans in wooden ships, not knowing what waited on the other side. We are the species that split the atom and walked on the moon and reached for the stars. We do not surrender. We do not submit. We do not go gentle into any night. So this is our answer to the Vorthanian hegemony: no. The word rang out across a planet, across a solar system, across the void of space. We will not surrender our children to slavery. We will not surrender our future to chains. We will not surrender our humanity to monsters who think they have the right to decide whether we live or die. If they want our world, they will have to burn it. If they want our species, they will have to break it. And if they want our surrender, they will have to tear it from our cold, dead hands. Because that's what they'll get. Not our surrender, not our submission. They'll get a fight. They'll get a war. And whatever happens, whatever it costs, they will learn what happens when you try to put humanity in a cage. We are Earth. We are humanity. And we do not kneel. The broadcast ended. And across the world, something stirred. Something ancient and primal and utterly, terrifyingly human. The next 12 hours were the longest in human history. In military installations around the world, soldiers reported for duty even as their families begged them to stay home for these final hours. The recruiters were overwhelmed. Young and old, men and women, people who had never held a weapon in their lives, all demanding to fight. "I'm 73 years old," one woman told a recruiting officer in Sao Paulo. "I was a combat pilot 50 years ago. I can still fly."
"Sir, you're far too—" the officer began.
"I'm not asking permission," the woman interrupted. "I'm telling you I'm going to fight. Now give me a goddamn uniform." She wasn't alone. Across Earth, retired soldiers dusted off their skills. Veterans who had sworn never to fight again found themselves reporting to their old units. Even those who had never served found ways to contribute. Factory workers switched to 24-hour shifts producing ammunition and spare parts. Engineers jury-rigged civilian craft with whatever weapons they could mount. Hackers and programmers formed impromptu cyber warfare units. In orbit, Admiral Chen reorganized her fleet with brutal efficiency. "We can't match them ship to ship," she told her captains in a holographic conference. "Their capital ships are larger, better armed, and better shielded than anything we have. If we try to fight a conventional battle, we'll be destroyed in the first exchange." "Then what do we do?" Captain James Rodriguez of the Endeavour asked. Chen pulled up a tactical display. "We fight asymmetrically. We use our size against them. Our ships are smaller, more maneuverable. We use the asteroid belt for cover. We use hit-and-run tactics. We make them bleed for every inch of space they take." "With respect, Admiral," Captain Yuki Tanaka of the Rising Sun spoke up, "even if we execute perfectly, we can only delay them. We can't stop a fleet that size." "I know," Chen said quietly, "but every hour we delay them is an hour that Earth has to prepare. Every ship we destroy is one less ship bombing our cities. We're not fighting to win, people. We're fighting to make it cost them." She looked at each captain in turn, memorizing their faces. Some of them wouldn't survive the next day. Maybe none of them would. "I won't order anyone to die," she continued. "Every captain who wants to take their ship and run, who wants to try to escape to the outer colonies, I won't stop you. I won't blame you. But I'm staying, and I'm fighting." Not a single captain disconnected from the call. "Then we have our orders," Chen said. "May whatever gods you pray to be with you. Defiance, out."
On Earth, the preparations took a darker turn.
In secret bunkers beneath the Himalayas, the Rockies, the Alps, and a dozen other remote locations, small groups of humanity's brightest minds were being sequestered, along with genetic samples, cultural archives, and enough supplies to last generations. "If the worst happens," President Okonkwo told them via secure channel, "you will be humanity's last hope. Stay hidden, stay quiet, wait for them to leave. And when they do, rebuild. Whatever happens, don't let them erase us." Deep beneath the earth, the hidden survivors nodded grimly and sealed their doors. But not everyone was preparing for survival. Some were preparing for something else entirely. In the Nevada desert, in a facility that didn't officially exist, a team of scientists worked frantically around a device that seemed to pulse with its own inner light. Dr. Elena Vazquez hadn't slept in 3 days. She was running on caffeine, adrenaline, and the desperate hope that her life's work might somehow make a difference. "The quantum tunneling array is stable," her assistant reported. "But Elena, we've never tested this at full power. We don't know what it will do." "We know what it might do," Vasquez replied, not taking her eyes off her calculations. "It might destabilize local space-time. It might create cascading quantum effects. It might—" she paused, rubbing her bloodshot eyes. "It might do nothing at all."
And if it works?
Vasquez finally looked up, meeting her assistant's gaze. "If it works, we might have a weapon that can level the playing field. Something they've never seen. Something they can't defend against." "And if it goes wrong?" Vasquez smiled, but there was no humor in it. "Then we'll be dead, and it won't be our problem anymore." In space, the Vorthanian fleet hung motionless, waiting. Supreme Commander Keth Voren observed the human preparations with something approaching curiosity. He had expected panic, chaos, perhaps even some futile attempt at negotiation. Instead, he watched as the primitive species organized itself for battle with surprising efficiency. "They are preparing to fight," his tactical officer observed, a note of disbelief in his voice. "They actually intend to resist." "They are young," Keth Voren replied. "They do not yet understand the nature of inevitability. They will learn." "Should we begin the assault early? Catch them before they are fully prepared?" Keth Voren considered the suggestion. It would be tactically sound. A preemptive strike would devastate the human fleet before it could organize. But that wasn't the hegemony's way. "No," he decided. "We gave them 12 hours. We will honor that commitment. Let them prepare. Let them position their pathetic fleet. Let them believe they have a chance. When we destroy them, the lesson will be all the more profound." "As you command." Keth Voren turned back to his observation screen, watching the small blue world that would soon belong to the hegemony. He wondered, briefly, how many of its inhabitants would survive the occupation. 1/10, perhaps? Maybe less. Enough to serve as labor and genetic stock, but not enough to ever pose a threat again. It was almost a shame. This species had potential. Given time, they might have been truly formidable. But the hegemony did not give potential threats time. The 12 hours ended. Admiral Chen stood on the bridge of the Defiance, her fleet arrayed around her in a formation that would have been laughable against an equal force. A desperate web of ships using the asteroid belt as cover, positioned to harass and retreat, harass and retreat. "All ships report ready," Commander Webb announced. "The Vorthanian fleet is moving." Chen watched the tactical display as the massive enemy armada began its advance. They moved with the casual confidence of a predator that had never faced a challenge, their formation designed to intimidate rather than optimize combat efficiency. "They're not even bothering with tactics," Captain Rodriguez observed over the fleet channel. "They think we're not worth the effort." "Good," Chen replied. "Let them underestimate us. It's the only advantage we have." The enemy fleet crossed the orbit of Neptune, then Uranus. Each hour brought them closer, their weapons powering up, their targeting systems locking on to the tiny human ships that dared to stand in their way. "They're entering effective weapons range," the tactical officer reported. 15 minutes to contact." Chen took a deep breath. This was it, the moment that would determine whether humanity lived or died. "All ships," she announced. "This is Admiral Chen. The enemy approaches. Our mission is simple. Make them pay for every inch they advance. Fight smart, fight hard, and above all, fight human." She paused. "Good luck, and good hunting." The Vorthanian fleet opened fire. The first volley was devastating. Bright beams of energy lanced across space, each one capable of cutting a human frigate in half. The humans had expected this. Their ships were already moving, using the asteroids as cover, presenting the smallest possible targets. Even so, 3 ships died in the first exchange. The Wellington, the Courage, and the Artemis simply ceased to exist, their hulls vaporized by weapons that outclassed anything humanity had ever built. But the humans struck back. The Defiance led the counterattack, her railguns hurling tungsten slugs at relativistic velocities. The projectiles slammed into the lead Vorthanian cruiser, and while they couldn't penetrate its primary shields, they forced the vessel to divert power from its weapons. "Keep firing," Chen ordered. "Keep them off balance." More human ships joined the assault, each one targeting a different enemy vessel, forcing the Vorthanians to disperse their shields. The tactic wouldn't destroy them, couldn't destroy them, but it would slow them down. And every second mattered. "Enemy fighters launching," the tactical officer called out. "Multiple contacts, hundreds of them." Chen had expected this too. The Vorthanian fighters were faster and better armed than anything humanity had, but they were also smaller, more vulnerable to the kind of weapons humans excelled at. "Launch all interceptors," she ordered. "Close-range engagement. Make them fight in our envelope." The space between the fleets erupted into chaos. Human and Vorthanian fighters wove between the asteroids, their weapons creating a deadly light show across the void. The humans took losses, severe losses, but they were taking the enemy with them. "I'm hit!" Captain Rodriguez's voice crackled over the comm. "Engine core is failing. I'm going to—" The Endeavour detonated, taking 2 Vorthanian fighters with it. Chen forced herself not to react. There was no time for grief, no time for anything but the battle. "All ships, maintain pressure. Keep them." The Vorthanian flagship fired. The weapon was something humanity had never seen. A lance of pure, concentrated energy that seemed to tear reality itself. It passed through the asteroid belt as if the rocks weren't there, vaporizing everything in its path. The rising sun simply disappeared along with half a dozen asteroids that had been providing cover. "What the hell was that?" Webb demanded. "Unknown weapon system," the tactical officer replied, his voice shaking. "Our sensors can barely track it. If they fire again—" "Then we'll be dead," Chen finished. "Everyone scatter! Don't give them a clear target!" The human fleet dispersed, their ships scattering like startled birds. It wasn't elegant, it wasn't tactical, but it was all they could do against a weapon like that.
The battle raged for 2 hours.
When it was over, humanity's orbital fleet had been reduced to 12 ships. 12 out of 42. More than 30 crews, thousands of sailors, had given their lives. But the Vorthanian fleet had lost 63 vessels. It was a victory by any normal metric. Any fleet that inflicted twice its own number in casualties could claim success. But the Vorthanians still had over 700 ships remaining. And Earth was directly ahead. The Vorthanian fleet entered high Earth orbit. Across the planet, 100 billion people looked up at the sky and saw their doom descending. In cities and towns, in villages and farms, humanity watched as the alien vessels took position, their weapons powering up for planetary bombardment. This is Supreme Commander Keth Voren, the alien's voice broadcast on every frequency. To the leaders of Earth. Your fleet has been destroyed. Your defenses are meaningless. You have one final opportunity to surrender and accept occupation. If you do not respond within 1 of your hours, we will begin bombardment of your population centers. In the ruins of USEF headquarters, the remaining military leaders gathered around a single working communications terminal. Their positioning for surgical strikes, General Marcus Cole analyzed, studying the enemy fleet positions. They want to destroy our military capability without rendering the planet uninhabitable. They still want us as a resource. Then we use that, Admiral Chen said. She had survived the space battle by sheer luck. Her ship had been crippled but not destroyed, and she'd managed to make it to the surface on an emergency shuttle. If they want to keep the planet intact, they can't use their heavy weapons freely. It limits them. It doesn't limit them enough, Cole replied grimly. They could still glass every major city on the planet with what they have. President Okonkwo entered the room, looking older than she had just 12 hours ago. Then we don't give them major cities to target, she said. We evacuate. We disperse. We make them hunt for us. With respect, Madam President, Cole said, that will only delay the inevitable. They have orbital superiority. They have scanners that can detect human life signs from space. They can find us no matter where we hide. Okonkwo nodded. I know. But delay is all we have, and while we delay... She turned to look at Chen. Admiral, what's the status of our remaining ships? Chen's jaw tightened. 12 ships operational. Most are damaged. They can't fight another pitched battle. Can they run? Chen paused, understanding dawning. You want them to escape, to flee to the colonies. I want them to survive, Okonkwo said, to carry word of what happened here, to give the colonies time to prepare, and maybe, someday, to come back. The Vorthanians will hunt them down, Cole warned. Maybe, probably, but some might make it, and some is better than none. Admiral Chen was quiet for a long moment. Then she nodded slowly. I'll give the order. The surviving ships will scatter, head for different colony worlds. The Vorthanians can't chase them all. And Earth? Cole asked. Okonkwo's eyes hardened. Earth fights, with everything we have. Until the last soldier falls or they burn us from orbit, we fight. The Vorthanian ground invasion began at sunset. Their landing craft descended in perfect formation, geometric shapes that moved with mechanical precision. Each craft carried hundreds of Vorthanian soldiers, tall, pale, seemingly emotionless beings in armor that gleamed like polished obsidian. They landed in the outskirts of Moscow, Tokyo, New York, Berlin, Beijing, and a dozen other major cities simultaneously. Their tactics were textbook perfect: secure a landing zone, establish a perimeter, advance in controlled formations. They expected scattered resistance, panicked civilians, perhaps some irregular fighters with outdated weapons. They were not prepared for what they found. In Moscow, the first Vorthanian patrol advanced down a wide boulevard toward the Kremlin. Their commander noted the absence of human life signs in the area. The civilians had clearly fled, as expected. The path was clear. And then the buildings exploded. Every structure on both sides of the street had been rigged with improvised explosives. The detonations caught the patrol in a crossfire of shrapnel and flame, killing dozens before they could even raise their shields. From the ruins, human soldiers emerged. Not regular military, many of them were civilians who had been given weapons just hours ago. But they attacked with a ferocity that shocked the Vorthanian survivors. "Contact!" the patrol commander screamed into his comm. "Heavy resistance! Request immediate!" A bullet punched through his helmet, silencing him forever. Similar scenes played out across the plant. In Tokyo, Vorthanian troops advancing through the Shibuya district found themselves facing a guerrilla network that seemed to know every alley, every building, every possible ambush point. The attackers struck and vanished, bleeding the invasion force one patrol at a time. In New York, the Hudson River Tunnel had been turned into a kill zone. Vorthanian forces advancing through the tunnel found themselves cut off and surrounded, their retreat sealed by explosives that brought the river crashing down upon them. In the Australian outback, indigenous fighters who knew the land like the back of their hands led Vorthanian search parties into deadly traps, concealed pits, fields of improvised explosives, sniper positions that seemed to be everywhere and nowhere. Supreme Commander Kethvaran observed the battle reports with growing disbelief. "This is impossible," he stated flatly. "These primitives cannot be inflicting these casualties. Our troops are trained, equipped, superior in every way." "The humans are not fighting conventionally," his tactical officer reported. "They refuse direct engagement. They attack from concealment and retreat before we can respond. They use their knowledge of the terrain to maximum advantage. And they are unusually willing to accept casualties." "Unusually willing?" The tactical officer hesitated. "Supreme Commander, we have recorded multiple instances of human combatants throwing themselves onto our positions with explosive devices. They are weaponizing their own deaths." Kethvaran went very still. In 50,000 years of hegemony history, they had conquered hundreds of species. Some had fought, some had resisted, but none had ever fought like this, with a desperation and fury that bordered on madness. "Increase bombardment," he ordered. "Target their infrastructure, their power grids, their communications. If they want to fight in the darkness, we will give them darkness." The orbital strikes began. Power grids across the planet failed as Vorthanian weapons targeted substations and generating plants. Communication satellites were destroyed one by one. Within hours, human civilization was effectively cut off, billions of people isolated, unable to coordinate, unable to share information. The Vorthanians expected this to break human resistance. Instead, it seemed to intensify it. In darkness, humanity fought. Dr. Elena Vasquez and her team had been working for 72 hours straight when the power failed. Emergency generators kicked in, barely enough to keep their equipment running. "We're close," Vasquez muttered, staring at her calculations. "So close. If we just had more time." Her assistant looked up from his console. Elena, there's something happening with the quantum array. The readings are off the charts. I've never seen anything like this." Vasquez rushed to his station, her exhausted eyes struggling to focus on the data streaming across the screen. What she saw made her blood run cold. "That's not possible," she whispered. "The array is operating itself. It's learning." "Learning what?" Before Vasquez could answer, the bunker shook violently. Dust rained down from the ceiling, and alarms began blaring. "Enemy forces are in the area!" a security officer shouted. "They found us!" Vasquez turned back to her console, her hands flying across the keyboard. "I need 10 more minutes. Just 10 more minutes!" "We don't have 10 minutes!" The blast door at the far end of the bunker buckled inward. Vorthanian soldiers poured through the gap, their weapons raised. "All personnel," the security officer ordered, "fall back to secondary positions. Protect the scientists." Vasquez kept working, even as gunfire erupted around her. Her assistant fell, struck by enemy fire. She didn't stop, couldn't stop, not when she was so close. The quantum array hummed louder, its core glowing with an otherworldly light. The readings continued to climb, beyond any theoretical prediction, beyond anything Vasquez had ever seen. A Vorthanian soldier appeared in front of her, its weapon aimed at her head. "Step away from the device," it commanded in heavily accented English. Vasquez looked at the soldier, then at her console, then at the quantum array. And she pressed the final button. The effect was instantaneous. Across Earth, every Vorthanian soldier froze in place. Not dead, not yet, but paralyzed, their nervous systems overwhelmed by a quantum pulse that their technology had no defense against. In orbit, the effect was even more dramatic. Vorthanian ships began to drift, their crews incapacitated, their systems crashing as the pulse overwhelmed their electronics. On the bridge of the Hegemony's Pride, Supreme Commander Keth Voran clutched his head, fighting against the wave of disorientation that threatened to consume him. His officers were screaming, collapsing around him. And for the first time in his long life, Keth Voran felt something he had never felt before. Fear. "What? What is happening?" he gasped. But there was no one left conscious to answer him. On the surface, human forces emerged from cover, staring in disbelief at the frozen enemy soldiers. General Cole received reports from every sector. Vorthanian forces were immobilized. They were vulnerable. They could be. "All units," Cole ordered, his voice barely containing his shock. "Engage the enemy. Full assault. Take them while we can." It wasn't a battle. It was an execution. Soldiers who had spent days fighting for their lives now advanced on helpless enemies, cutting them down without mercy. Every grievance, every loss, every moment of terror, it all came pouring out in a wave of violence that would have horrified humanity in peacetime. But this wasn't peacetime. This was survival. In Tokyo, troops cleared the Shibuya district in 30 minutes, leaving no Vorthanian survivors. In New York, the frozen enemy forces in the streets were systematically eliminated, their advanced armor useless against weapons fired at point-blank range. Across the world, humanity struck back. But the quantum pulse couldn't last forever. Vasquez had warned them. The effect was temporary, a one-time shot that had drained every last erg of power from her array. Already, some Vorthanian soldiers were beginning to stir, their superior physiology fighting off the pulse's effects. And in orbit, the Vorthanian fleet was recovering. Supreme Commander Keth Voran opened his eyes. His head throbbed with a pain unlike anything he had ever experienced, but his thoughts were clearing. Around him, his bridge crew was slowly regaining consciousness.
"Status report," he croaked. "Now."
It took several minutes to compile the data. When it arrived, Kethvorin could only stare at it in disbelief. 90% of their ground forces had been killed during the incapacitation period. 37 ships had been destroyed by human survivors who had used the opportunity to launch improvised attacks, ramming their vessels, detonating nuclear devices, anything to hurt the invaders. In less than an hour, humanity had inflicted more casualties on the hegemony than any species had in 10,000 years.
"This is not possible," Kethvorin whispered. "They are primitives. They cannot."
"Supreme Commander," his tactical officer interrupted, his voice shaking. "We're receiving a transmission from the human command."
"What?" "They want to."
Kethvorin's silver eyes narrowed. "Put them through." The view screen flickered, and President Okonkwo's face appeared. She looked haggard, exhausted, but her eyes burned with something that made even Kethvorin uncomfortable. "Supreme Commander," Okonkwo said, "I believe we need to talk."
"You dare address me after what you have done?"
"I dare everything," Okonkwo replied. "That's what humans do. And right now, I'm here to give you a choice." Kethvorin's hands tightened on his command throne. "You are in no position to offer choices. You have no fleet. Your cities lie in ruins. We have nuclear weapons," Okonkwo interrupted. "Lots of them. And before you say you can intercept them, understand that they're not on missiles. They're on timers, hidden all over our planet. If you glass our cities, we'll do the job ourselves and take your remaining ground forces with us."
"You would destroy your own world?"
"To keep you from having it? In a heartbeat." Kethvorin fell silent. He studied the human leader, searching for any sign of deception, any hint of bluff. He found none. "You're insane," he finally said. "Your entire species is insane."
"Maybe," Okonkwo admitted. "But that's not the point. The point is this. You came here expecting an easy conquest. You expected us to surrender or die quietly. Instead, we've killed most of your ground forces and destroyed dozens of your ships. And we're just getting started."
She leaned forward. "So here's my offer. You leave. Now. Take your remaining forces and go back to wherever you came from. Tell your hegemony that Earth is not worth the trouble. Tell them that if they want this planet, they'll have to reduce it to radioactive glass. And what good is a dead world to anyone?" "You think you've won?" Kethvorin demanded, his voice rising. "You've won nothing. You're still outgunned, outnumbered."
"We've won time," Okonkwo cut him off, "and that's all we ever needed. While we've been fighting here, our remaining ships have escaped to our colonies. They're carrying word of what happened, along with the technology that shut down your forces. By the time you reach our other worlds, they'll be ready for you. And the war, the real war, will be just beginning."
Kethvorin stared at her, and for the first time, he truly saw what he was dealing with. Not primitives, not animals, something far more dangerous. Survivors. Humanity hadn't evolved in comfortable circumstances. They had crawled out of the primordial mud, fighting every step of the way. They had survived ice ages and predators and natural disasters that would have exterminated lesser species. They had fought each other for resources, for territory, for ideas that existed only in their minds. And in all that struggle, they had developed something that the hegemony had never needed to develop. Resilience.
The Vorthanians had conquered their world easily, had spread across the stars without meaningful opposition. They had never faced extinction, never known true desperation.
Humans had faced it constantly. They had made it their companion, their teacher, their weapon.
You may destroy us, Okonkwo continued. Today, tomorrow, a century from now. But before we go, we will hurt you in ways you cannot imagine. We will make you bleed for every inch of space, every world, every victory. And eventually, you will look at the cost and wonder if it was worth it.
She paused. Or you can leave, right now, and we can both pretend this never happened.
Kethvoran sat in silence for a long moment. In 50,000 years of hegemony history, no supreme commander had ever retreated from a conquest. It was unthinkable, shameful, a permanent stain on the honor of his line. But in 50,000 years, no conquest had ever cost this much. The Vorthanian fleet began to withdraw. It took 3 hours for them to collect their remaining forces and form up for hyperspace departure. During that time, humanity watched with bated breath, weapons at the ready, waiting for the attack that never came. Supreme Commander Kethvoran made one final transmission before his fleet departed. "This is not over," he said, his silver eyes burning with barely contained fury. "The hegemony does not forget, does not forgive. Someday we will return. And when we do, your species will learn the true meaning of subjugation." President Okonkwo received the transmission in her bunker. She watched the alien's face, saw the rage and humiliation in his eyes, and felt something unexpected. Pity. "I believe you'll try," she replied quietly. "But I also believe you still don't understand what you're dealing with. We're not the first species you've conquered, but we might be the last. Because now the galaxy knows you can be beaten, and that knowledge is worth more than any weapon." The transmission ended, and the Vorthanian fleet jumped to hyperspace, leaving behind a scarred but unbroken Earth. The victory was not bloodless. Billions had died in the bombardment and ground fighting. Cities lay in ruins. Infrastructure had been shattered. The world that humans had built over centuries would take decades to rebuild. But they would rebuild. In the weeks that followed, messages began arriving from the outer colonies. The surviving ships had made it. The technology that Dr. Vasquez had developed was being analyzed, replicated, improved. Humanity was preparing for the war that everyone knew was coming. And something else was happening too. Word of Earth's resistance had spread. Other species, some of whom had been under hegemony control for millennia, were beginning to ask questions. If humanity could resist, could fight back, could wound the invincible Vorthanians, what else was possible? Rebellion stirred in a dozen systems. The first cracks appeared in the hegemony's ancient empire. 1 year after the invasion, humanity held a ceremony. It took place on what had once been the plains outside Nairobi, now a vast memorial garden, filled with monuments to those who had died in the battle for Earth. Every nation, every culture, every faith had contributed to the design. It was humanity's collective memory, given physical form. President Okonkwo stood at the central podium, looking out at a crowd that numbered in the millions. Cameras broadcast her words to every corner of human space. "1 year ago," she began, "an empire came to our world. They demanded our surrender. They told us that resistance was futile, that our only choices were submission or death." She paused, letting the wind carry her words across the crowd. "They were wrong. They looked at us and saw primitives, animals, resources to be exploited or threats to be eliminated. They didn't see what we really are. They didn't understand what makes us human. We are not the strongest species in the galaxy. We are not the oldest, or the wisest, or the most technologically advanced. But we are something that all their power and all their history could not prepare them for. We are stubborn.
A ripple of laughter went through the crowd, mixed with tears.
We are creative. We are desperate. We are angry. And above all, we are together. When they came for us, we didn't scatter or surrender. We fought. Rich and poor, young and old, soldiers and civilians. We fought because that's what humans do. We fought because we had no other choice. We fought because the alternative was unthinkable. And we won. The crowd erupted in cheers, not triumphant, but defiant. The sound echoed across the memorial garden, across the plain, across the world.
But we did not gather here to celebrate victory, Okonkwo continued as the noise subsided. We gathered here to remember, to honor those who gave everything so that the rest of us could live. Every name on these monuments, every face on these walls, they are the true heroes of humanity. They bought our survival with their blood. And we will never forget them.
She turned to face the largest monument, a massive obelisk inscribed with millions of names.
The Vorthanian hegemony came to our world expecting our surrender. They believed they would leave with a new slave species, another trophy for their ancient empire. Instead, they left with nothing but their dead. They wanted surrender. We gave them a funeral. She turned back to the crowd. Let this be a message to every species in the galaxy, to the hegemony and to all who might seek to conquer or enslave us. Humanity is not a species to be trifled with. We are not prey. We are not cattle. We are not yours to rule. We are the children of Earth. We are the survivors of 1,000 extinctions. We are the descendants of every human who ever looked up at the stars and refused to be afraid. And we are just getting started. The next 50 years saw humanity transform.
The colonies expanded, each one becoming a fortress in its own right. The technology that Dr. Vasquez had pioneered, the quantum resonance arrays, was refined and weaponized. New ships were built, larger and more powerful than anything humanity had previously conceived.
And they needed every advantage they could get. The hegemony returned, as promised. Again and again, their fleets appeared at the edges of human space, testing defenses, probing for weaknesses. Each time, they were met with resistance that grew more sophisticated, more deadly. But the war was no longer humanity's alone.
In the Centauri system, human forces fought alongside the Kethrani, a species that had been under hegemony control for 8,000 years before the events on Earth inspired their own uprising. Their technology complemented humanity's, their numbers bolstered the alliance.
In the Vegas sector, the Mantis Collective, crystalline beings who had hidden from the hegemony for millennia, emerged from seclusion. They offered something invaluable, detailed intelligence on hegemony operations, weaknesses, and strategies.
And in 100 other systems, species that had once cowered before the hegemony now raised their heads. The empire that had seemed eternal was beginning to crack.
Supreme Commander Kethvorin, now Grand Admiral Kethvorin, elevated for his experience despite his failures, watched the reports with growing despair. The humans had been bad enough. Now they were inspiring others, organizing resistance, building an alliance that grew stronger with each passing year.
We should have exterminated them, he told his council. When we had the chance, we should have destroyed their world and been done with it. The High Command would never have approved, one of his advisors replied. The resources mean nothing now. Kethvorin slammed his fist on the table. What good are resources when the galaxy rises against us? When species that have served us for eons suddenly remember what it means to be free?
The advisor fell silent.
The humans, Kethvorin continued, his voice dropping to a whisper, are a disease, a contagion. They spread their ideology, their insane, suicidal determination wherever they go. And now that contagion is killing us.
The war lasted 80 years. In the end, it came down to a single battle, the siege of Vorthan Prime.
The human-led alliance had fought its way across the galaxy, liberating world after world, gathering strength as they went. Now they stood at the gates of the hegemony's homeworld, the heart of an empire that had endured for 50,000 years.
Admiral Chen Wei-Lin was 112 years old. Life extension technology had kept her alive, but she looked every year of her age. She had spent 8 decades fighting the hegemony, had watched friends and colleagues die, had witnessed both the best and worst of what war could bring out in people.
But she had also seen humanity survive, adapt, prevail. Now she stood on the bridge of the Defiance Third, the third ship to bear the name, each one larger and more powerful than the last, and watched as the Alliance fleet surrounded Vorthan Prime.
Grand Admiral Kethvorin is requesting communication, her XO reported.
Chen smiled, though there was no humor in it.
Put him through.
The view screen showed a face that had become familiar over decades of war. Kethvorin had aged too. His silver eyes were dimmer now, his pale skin marked by the scars of a lifetime of conflict.
Admiral Chen, he said, we meet again.
Grand Admiral, I'd say it's a pleasure, but we both know that would be a lie.
Kethvorin nodded slowly. I have thought about you often over the years, about your species, about the war that we could have avoided if only.
If only you had left us alone?
If only we had understood what you truly were. Kethvorin's voice was heavy with something that might have been regret. We looked at your history, saw your wars and your cruelty and your endless conflicts with each other, and we thought we understood. We thought you were simply another aggressive species that needed to be contained.
But we were wrong. You are not merely aggressive. You are tenacious, adaptive, unstoppable. Whatever we threw at you, you survived. Whatever weapons we developed, you countered. Whatever advantages we held, you erased.
That's what humans do, Chen replied. We adapt, we overcome, and we never, ever give up.
So I have learned. Kethvorin looked down at his command console. My fleet is outnumbered. My defenses are failing. For the first time in 50,000 years, an enemy force stands ready to assault the hegemony's homeworld.
We can end this, Chen said, right now. Surrender and your people will be spared. We're not here for genocide, we're here for freedom.
Kethvorin was silent for a long moment.
You know, he said finally, when I was young, I was taught that the hegemony was eternal, inevitable, that nothing in the universe could challenge our supremacy. I believed it. Every Vorthanian believed it.
And now?
Now I know that nothing is eternal, nothing is inevitable, and the universe is far stranger and more dangerous than any of us ever imagined. He looked up, meeting Chen's eyes through the screen. I will accept your terms.
I will order my forces to stand down. The war is over."
"The war is over," Chen agreed, "but the work is just beginning." The fall of the hegemony did not bring peace. It never does. The galaxy was in chaos. Thousands of species, many of them former hegemony subjects, suddenly free to determine their own destinies. Old grievances resurfaced, new conflicts emerged. It would take generations to build something stable from the wreckage of the old order. But humanity was ready for the challenge. In the century that followed, the United Human Federation became one of the leading powers in the galactic community. Not through conquest, though they could have conquered if they chose, but through alliance, cooperation, and the simple willingness to help where help was needed. The Federation's values spread across the stars: freedom, self-determination, the refusal to submit to tyranny. Species that had never known anything but oppression began to explore what it meant to be free. Cultures that had been stagnant for millennia began to create, to innovate, to dream. And at the center of it all was Earth, the blue world that had almost been enslaved, the planet that had refused to surrender, the birthplace of a species that had looked into the face of extinction and said no. On the 100th anniversary of the invasion, a new monument was unveiled on the plains outside Nairobi. It stood beside the original memorial garden, but where that memorial honored the dead, this one celebrated the living. It was a massive sculpture, a human hand reaching up toward the stars, fingers spread wide as if trying to grasp infinity. At its base was a single inscription. They wanted our surrender. We gave them a funeral. They wanted our submission. We gave them a revolution. They wanted our future. We gave them theirs. We are humanity, and the stars are ours. In the archives of the former hegemony, a single document survived the chaos of their fall. It was a final report from Grand Admiral Keth, written before his surrender. To all who may read this in the ages to come, the humans are not what we thought. They are not primitives. They are not animals. They are something far more dangerous. They are survivors. They emerged from a world that tried to kill them 1,000 times. They endured ice ages and plagues and disasters that would have destroyed any lesser species. They fought themselves with such ferocity that we assumed they would destroy themselves before they ever posed a threat to us. We were wrong. Everything that makes humans dangerous, their aggression, their stubbornness, their refusal to accept defeat, are the very qualities that allowed them to survive. They do not give up. They do not surrender. They do not know how. And when we gave them an enemy to unite against, when we gave them a reason to stop fighting each other and start fighting us, we created a monster that we could not control. Let this be a lesson to whoever follows us. Let this be the epitaph of the Vorthanian hegemony. Never threaten the species that has nothing to lose. Never underestimate a species that has survived everything. And never, ever try to conquer humanity. They will give you a war. They will give you a lesson. And they will give you a funeral. On a distant world, a young human child looked up at the night sky and asked her grandmother about the lights. "Those are stars," the grandmother said, her weathered face soft with memory. "Other suns with other worlds around them. Some of them have people on them now, our people." "Why?" the child asked. "Why are we on those worlds?" The grandmother smiled. "Because once, a long time ago, some very bad people came to our home and told us that we weren't allowed to go there. They said the stars belonged to them. They said we should surrender accept our place, give up our dreams. But we said no, and then we took the stars anyway."
The child was quiet for a moment. Then she smiled, the same stubborn, determined smile that had been passing down through human generations since the first ancestor crawled out of the primordial sea.
"Good," she said, and she reached up toward the stars as if she could touch them. Maybe someday she would. Author's note: this is the story of humanity, not as we are, but as we might become. We are a species of survivors, of fighters, of dreamers who refuse to accept limits. When the universe finally notices us, when the powers that be decide that we should kneel, remember this story. Remember what we are capable of, and remember that no matter what the odds, no matter what the enemy, we have something that cannot be taken from us. We have each other, we have our determination, and we have the stars. They're waiting for us. All we have to do is reach for them.